I'm so excited that you took the time to join us on the next episode of Beyond the Culture. This is the show where we embrace change and challenge cultural norms and ideals. I'm your host, Dr. David Walker. And how are you today?
I'm fine. I really am fine. I'm happy it's Friday, but it's not raining. It's a great day. It's not cold. I think that we've seen the last of the cold here in Louisiana, so I'm happy.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to have you on the show today, and please let me give you your official introduction.
Okay.
Today on the show we have Juanita Johnson. Juanita is the Sankofa griot of our time. Her attraction to the concept of positive audacity began in childhood as she listened to fascinating dinner table stories which featured the achievements of African-American luminaries, change agents, and historical personalities. Those stories continue to serve as her North Star of fearlessness. Juanita is a graduate of Dillard University. She holds an MBA from the Ohio State University. Currently, she facilitates the Sankofa Chronicles, a web-based edutainment platform which instills pride and self-confidence in children through its focus on character building, African-American history, and culture. She is the author of the Audacity Code, Coloring in Black Outside the Lines, which we will discuss later on in the conversation. So I'm just super excited to have on the show on Beyond the Culture, my guest today, Juanita Johnson. Juanita, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker, and thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and I am glad to have you on today. And as I've mentioned it to you, but most of our listeners know this month is Women's History Month, and I'm calling it Women's Her Story Month.
Correct.
Because it is her story, and we want to give her all the credit because she is phenomenal. And of course, we celebrate legendary women in our community, the Michelle Obamas, the Kamala Harrises. Here's some people: Mahalia Jackson, Ruby Bridges, Leah Chase, Aretha Castle Haley, and Burnett Joshua Johnson. And yes, anyone from the state of Louisiana should know who all of those people are.
And so, yes, I do. And I know you
proud. Do. Yes, you are. And you should be. And you should be, because all of those have a connection to Louisiana, either born there or raised. So we're honoring all of our women in history. So I'm just excited to have you, Juanita. So let's just start here. Give us your background. We've already mentioned that you're from Louisiana. So tell us about it. Your background. How was it growing up in Louisiana? Just give us your backstory.
I think I had an idyllic childhood, though I didn't realize the world around me was not idyllic. I grew up on Main Street, literally Main Street, USA. There weren't any picket fences, but all the houses were neat, well kept, full of kids. We loved doing everything we wanted to do until the street lights came on. Then it was time to come in and have dinner. And that's when my unofficial introduction to African-American greatness and achievement and excellence would happen over the dinner table with my parents. I loved being in Louisiana, but I didn't realize that at that time, many parts of Louisiana didn't love me as a person.
Okay.
I was a young child during the early part of the 60s when the legislation had allowed for voting, civil rights, integrated access, and things like that were being signed. And I also remember being between 8 and 9 when the Black Panthers came on the scene and being very inspired by what they had to say. Even though I didn't quite understand all of it as a young child, I knew it was important and I liked the way it sounded. And so I never grew up with feeling slighted, that I was less than second-class citizen. I felt that I was as equal to anybody else, that I could have anything that I wanted to have, both as a Black person and as a woman. And I set my life intentions on doing that. unfortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately, but as an adult, I realized that my parents worked very hard to put me in a cocoon that said that the world was my pearl and all I had to do was just to open the orchard to get it. And pretty much I've taken that attitude forward. However, I have learned through reading, through documentaries, through life experience, that everybody did not share the same expectations for me as a human, much less as a Black human or as a female human. So that's a little bit of my past.
Great. And so obviously you grew up in the 60s, just like I did.
Yes.
I was born in 1960. So,
okay.
But I grew up in the North, and you said something very, very powerful. And often when I look back on my life and history, it would be opposite from what you just said. You said, you never grew up slighted, at least from what was going on in the home.
Correct.
You had a culture in the home that was very positive. It spoke about African Americans as, great people. I lived in the North, so not so much that I experienced overt racism in the North in the 60s, but we didn't have those conversations about, Black pride and Black celebrity and Black self-esteem. And in many ways, I think it kind of affected me, but I think it was very empowering for you. Is that what I'm understanding from you?
It was extremely empowering. It's helpful that Baton Rouge had a university, or had two universities, LSU, which most people are familiar with, but Southern University, which at that particular time, Southern was really in an upward trajectory because of federal funding. It allowed more Blacks to go to college. And so the university had all kinds of community programs that would bring in Black academics, Black celebrities. They had a powerful football team, a world-renowned band. There were expressions that were clearly African-American in their focus, but there also were expressions of Eurocentric expressions. For example, I remember there was a community production of Porky and Bess.
Yes.
And it was an excellent first-class New York type of production that took almost a year to mount. But I just took it that, this is how life goes, and it really didn't go like that for everybody. So I had the good fortune of going to Black schools.
Okay.
Elementary school. I experienced integration in junior high school, like many people. But by the time I got to high school, whatever angst people may have had in terms of the student body against each other, we pretty much have worked through those issues, whatever they may have been. And we lived like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be. Black kids are supposed to go to school with white kids are supposed to go to school with Black kids.
Right.
So, not only did my parents do a phenomenal job, I feel, but also the community. There were fraternal organizations with youth components. I went to camp every summer, a camp that was owned by the Masons. There isn't any traditional American experience that I probably didn't experience, but it was experienced through the lens of a Black person. Therefore, I just felt like this is the way, this is how it goes. But I do remember when the Masons made the decision to start a camp that they owned for Black students. For many years previously, they had rented a facility that was not owned by African Americans. They decided that together, collective economics, we could build a camp that we could manage and have it for African American students and rent it out to other people if they chose to want to rent the camp, like we had rented out other camps. And so I remember being the first one to leap off the bus when they had the dedication service. And my grandmother was very excited because she had lived through the worst of the American terror. She was born in the late 1890s. So she had seen a lot. So for her to see her granddaughter be able to go to camp every summer that was managed by people who looked like her, programmed by people who looked like her, and had expectations that she had similar expectations for me, which is a wonderful experience.
You know, absolutely. And, you know, that's really inspiring what you said. Let me go here. You know, when I introduced you, it said that you were listening to fascinating dinner table stories as a child. Take us back to any particular night that you can recall at the house where someone was telling a story. What kind of story would they be telling, and what did you hear? And can you share one of those stories with us?
And the one that comes to mind at this particular time is the story concerning Dory Miller, who was the hero at Pearl Harbor, originally from Texas, was a mess man, did many heroic things, shot they call it a Widowmaker, the big guns that took down the Japanese planes out of the sky, helped ferry other wounded and dead mates off the ship. And he was one of the last 3 people to exit the ship because he was just that vital to what was going on. Up until my parents told me that particular story, I had no interest in World War II. It meant nothing to me. What I saw in the films, I saw nobody who looked like me. And when I heard people discuss World War II, nobody looked like me. So I felt it was something that I wasn't involved in. Mm-hmm. But the minute my mother told me about Dory Miller and the smile that came across her face, because I believe when his heroic feats were occurring, she was probably between 12 or 13 years old. And she just went back to her childhood and just the pride that she felt. Not only that he was Black, but that he was Southern and that he was a hero.
Yes.
That awakened my interest in Blacks in the military. But the way she presented it to me as if, oh my goodness, this man walked water. And of course, I guess because as a child, she didn't tell me that 18 months later, he would lose his life in a torpedo attack on another ship. But she just left me hanging with that this man was somebody who made us so very proud. Mm. So that's one example.
Okay. And as you brought up Dory Miller, I know you included him in your book. We're going to talk about him and other African Americans that you included in the book. But I just wanted to touch on what you were saying about Dory Miller. And many may remember that Cuba Gooding Jr. portrayed him in the movie Pearl Harbor. Right. I think it was back in the early 2000, 2001. Early 2000s. Yeah. So there was some recognition of Dory Miller and his impact in World War II. So let me move on and get to this particular point. When in your introduction or in your bio, it uses the term that you are the Sankofa griot of our time. And I want to talk about that because everyone may not know Sankofa, what's a griot. And I want you to talk about that and explain it so we can get a better understanding of a Sankofa griot. Yeah, the term, yes.
Well, a griot is a storyteller. In terms of West African linguistics, a griot represents the word storyteller. And Sankofa is the concept of looking back to move forward. And so I like to look back to take the wisdom, the lessons, the values from the past and share them with others to move our society forward. And I not only share with African Americans, I share with non-African Americans, European Americans, Asian Americans, whoever will listen, simply because a lot of people have very skewed, very narrow, very limited, negative images of African Americans. And when I share stories like the Dory Miller, like the other individuals in the book, just something may come up in conversation. It's like, oh, did you know about this Black person who did this, accomplished this, or stood fast for this particular issue or position? They usually don't.
Right.
And so I not only try to tell the story, but I also try to pick out what I value in the story as wisdom and suggest that others consider that particular piece of wisdom, or if not, find their own wisdom within the story or within other African Americans. We're not a monolithic people. We never have been. We never will be. We have impacted all of America. We weren't And we didn't just impact it economically as unpaid wage earners or not earners, wage slaves. Mm-hmm. We impacted the creativity, the artistic creativity, the business acumen, the sciences. There's so many areas that Blacks have impacted and have made wonderful, one-of-a-kind contributions to the country. It's just that people just don't know.
Okay. Absolutely. And when you were talking, you said something, and I wrote it down right quick. And you said that many people have limiting views of African Americans. And so the question I want to ask you is, what is some of the common myths about Black people that, people have that is just not true?
That Black people have no history. That we went from slavery to 1964, Martin Luther King, and that's it. Or that if we do have a history, it contains 12 people. Those 12 people tend to be civil rights icons, such as Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Martin Luther King, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama. Yeah. And maybe they'll throw in Andy Young.
Yeah, right.
For good measure. Uh-huh. So it's either we have no history or we have a history, but it's only limited to civil rights achievements. And for those who I guess call themselves generous, okay, entertainment achievements. Right. You have some singers, you have some hoopers, some ball throwers, but past that, you don't really bring much to the table. So that's one belief, the non-history. Right, the other belief is that the average African American is an other or either invisible. If they think about African Americans, they think of us in terms of fear, right? Criminal, low economics, on welfare. Mm-hmm. Every negative stereotype or every negative story that tends to have a Black face attached to it. And I sort of relish in telling people, but what you see is not the truth. Right. There are more non-African Americans on welfare than there are African Americans. There are, in terms of the population for criminal activity, usually people, and when it relates to serious crimes, are involved with someone of their same race. They're telling me it's cross-racial, mm-hmm. A Black person knifing a person who's not African American. And so it's those small conversations that a person feels comfortable enough to share the little that they do know and find the strength and the grace to say, but that's not quite the picture. This is what the real picture is.
You are so right about many people feel that we don't have a history. Recently, there were two events that came, came across my table. Mm-hmm. One had to do with the founding fathers, and there was this picture of them in, I guess, whatever the room was that they were writing the Constitution in Philadelphia. And throughout the whole picture, all you saw was white men. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand, they were the founding fathers. They wrote the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, all that kind of stuff. But there was not one Black person in that picture.
Of course, because we're invisible.
We're invisible. And that's exactly what it was. I said, wait a minute. You can't tell me that we weren't in the room. Maybe we weren't founding fathers signing documents, but we were in that room with them.
Not only were we in the room, we were in that neighborhood, because if you've ever gone to Independence Park in Philadelphia, I lived in Philadelphia for 5 years, the neighborhood literally right next door to Independence Park was where Mother AME, Mother yes. Bethel was started.
That's right.
And so Blacks were right there, right next door. And I probably would bet you $1 to a dime that somebody was cooking some food in the back.
Exactly. Or serving something.
Or serving some food. Yeah. And I don't think it was somebody who didn't look like me.
That's right. Exactly. And the other one was, we had the recent incident. It was more than an incident. It was an insurrection at the Capitol building back on January the 6th. and someone emailed me a picture of the people who built the Capitol.
Yes.
And it was African Americans who were there, right there,
Correct.
building. And the point is that is something, although the Capitol is the center of American government, it's almost as though we had no role, no part, because they never talk about it. They will take victory for it and claiming it and things of that nature. But those Black men were right there as a part of building the center of America. And for all of these years, they have been invisible.
Correct. And when the plans for Washington, when the planner or architect, decided that this, for whatever reason, he wasn't going to stay and complete the work, it was Benjamin Banneker who
that's right,
memorized the plans and shared what he knew to make the buildings appear. Many times people romanticize the plantations of the South as going with the wind type of terror places, but those buildings were built by African Americans. They didn't have computer-assisted design, and many of the smaller plantations, they were built on designs that were of African origin in terms of allowing the house to be cooled naturally, especially in Louisiana, where it gets steamy hot, like in Florida.
Right.
And there was no air conditioning, there was no rotary fan. All you had was God's sweet air. And so you had to build those buildings to be able to withstand the constant 9 months out of 10, 9 months out of 12 months of heat, humidity, rain, pests, mosquitoes. And a lot of that knowledge came from African-American people who at that time were enslaved. They would not pay for their labor, they would not pay for their knowledge, but other people benefited from their knowledge. And today you can buy a house and within 3 years, you probably knocked a hole in the drywall. These plantations have withstood hundreds of years.
Wow.
And that says something about the craftsmanship that was involved.
I agree. I so agree with what you said. So you are an author and you wrote this outstanding book, and the title of it is The Audacity Code, Coloring in Black Outside the Lines. And then it says, some African Americans defy societal limitations and built lives of achievement by coloring outside the lines. When I read that last sentence, I said, that's nothing but beyond the culture. that's beyond.
Great minds think alike.
Absolutely. So tell us about the book, the inspiration of it. Why did you write it?
I wrote it because I've done presentations at different venues throughout the years, but I realized that just because of time and space limitations, I can only do so much in a particular time, but a book can go any and everywhere and it will live past longer than I will. And so I wrote the book to share stories that always sort of float across my mind on any given day for probably inspiration. And what I think that these stories stay with me and have stayed with me is because these people achieved phenomenal self-fulfillment in a time when Blacks could only hope for the most part, meager survival or existence. And I know that genius is widespread. It is not a rare commodity as we are taught to believe, but something inside of these people, be it the value of determination, the value of integrity, the value of collective economics, that one of the principles in Kwanzaa, back before then it was called being a race person. These people just represent some of the better things in life that I would like to at least say that I touched. I don't always consistently live at the highest level that I could, but I do have role models to aspire to.
Okay.
Historical role models. So with the Audacity Code, I chose the name the Audacity Code simply because these people had the positive audacity to be self-determined, self-defined, regardless if it took a lifetime, if it took, and usually it did take a lifetime to reach the pinnacle of success, be it in the theater, be it as a private entrepreneur, as a athlete. The woman who starts off the book, Mom Bet, she was determined, so determined to experience freedom that she has this quote that I just love that basically says that she would have done anything to spend 1 minute as a free human being on God's earth if it meant that she'd have to give up her life because she had spent that 1 minute as a free person. Okay. Her story is so audacious in what she did, not only to free herself, but the results of her freeing herself, her audacious, bold, in-your-face moves that she made, not only freed the other Blacks who were enslaved at that particular moment in Massachusetts, but it also led the way for slavery to be outlawed in the state of Massachusetts based on law and order. We love our legal system. We love the fact that we have legal precedents. In her case, was part of the legal precedents that outlawed slavery in Massachusetts.
Okay.
So that's, you know, many times when the word audacious is used as it related to Blacks, it's like, can you believe that that Black person, which was not used as a term Black person, but we know the other word, would not get off the sidewalk for my wife to pass by, or decided that she had had enough of working for us for $2 a day and she wasn't coming back here to work anymore. Usually it was some negative or something that displeased those outside the community. But I use the term in terms of the person pleased themselves, that they went after their goals and were able to achieve their goals. So a great deal of struggle, strife, belief, hope, determination, but they did arrive at their personal promised land.
Yes. That was, what was Ma Bet? You said her name was?
Yes, Mom Bet.
Mom Bet. Just give me, I know you, and you spoke about Dory Miller. Give me one other person that's in the book, just a quick summary. I
like this woman, and I think most people can relate to it because we all love food. Okay. Lena Richard, I always say Richard, because in Louisiana we have both the English and the French pronunciation. And usually when I see the word Richard, it's pronounced Richard.
Right.
But in this case, it really is Richard. She was born in the early 1890s. And her career aspects were pretty limited. She could be one or two things. She could probably be a maid, or she could be a janitress. Take your choice. Well, her mother and aunt were domestic employees in a very wealthy family's home in New Orleans. And as a teenager, she was given the job, when she wasn't in school, of babysitting this family's children. One day, the family cook decided that she had had enough and she wasn't coming back anymore. So they asked Lena to cook, and they were so taken by her just natural gifts and talents as a cook that they hired her to be a cook. And not only did they hire her to be a cook, they provided her the opportunity to go to then the most famous cooking school, and it still is famous to this day historically, the Fannie Farmer Cooking School in Massachusetts. As opposed to just going and, you know, soaking up the knowledge and coming back and just doing what she wanted to do for herself, bettering herself, she decided that this could be an opportunity for other Black people. So she nursed a dream for 20 years of opening a cooking school for Blacks in New Orleans, because she, of course, listened to the dinner conversations that she was a party to as a cook in the Varn household. She knew that the city was banking on tourism as a way to bring money into the coffers once slavery was dead and gone for good. And she thought that as opposed to working for a paltry $1 or $2 a day, if she could train young Black people in scientific cooking, the methods she had learned at the Fannie Farmer School, perhaps they could work for the local hotels. If not, they could get on a train and go to the East Coast or go to the West Coast. So it was the trajectory of her life. Not only did she open a cooking school for Black students, she had a frozen food company. She was recruited by the Rockefellers to work at Colonial Williamsburg when it was first put on the map. And historically, she is the first woman to have a cooking show on television. This was in the early days when television arrived in the 1950s, before either you and I was here. But can you imagine a Black woman having a television show in the Deep South every day? And it was considered must-see TV. Most people didn't even own the TV when television first came out, and I'm sure very few Blacks owned it. So clearly her audience was not an African-American audience, but she had such a reputation, such abilities that everybody tuned into her show. And so her life was not spent on enriching herself. Her life was spent on trying to provide a better way for Blacks. She ran her cooking school, not because she needed the money of running the school, but because she was trying to train young people and give them an opportunity to either apply their skills in the city or take the skills somewhere else where they would be paid a decent life wage. She wrote the first Creole cookbook that was acclaimed. And James Beard, who everybody bandies his name around now as the guru of fine dining, he was so impressed with the book that he got one of the major publishers to reprint the book. But interestingly enough, when the book was reprinted, her picture was taken out of the book and it was retitled Creole Cooking, not the Lena Richard's cookbook, which is what happened in those days. But she not only was a food ambassador, but she was also a believer in collective economics and empowerment for her community. And that's what I admire so much about her.
So on Thursday, March the 18th, you're going to be having a Sankofa Circle.
Yes. Where
you will be doing a live reading and having a conversation about the book and maybe other topics. So here's what I want to do. Tell us more about that. How can people tune in to that particular event?
Well, thank you so much. On next Thursday, which will be the 18th of March, I am having the first Sankofa Circle, where I will be sharing excerpts and other background material about some of the characters in the book that I didn't include for editorial reasons. It also will talk about the values that move us as people. We need to get back to being more concerned about each other as opposed to being concerned about upward trajectory for ourselves only. So this is an opportunity for anyone who's interested in coming. You can go to my website, which is Juanita B. Johnson, because there are two Juanitas on the internet. So my grandmother always told me to use my middle initials, and it came in handy.
There you go.
JuanitaBJohnson.com. So I love for everybody to come. The more people, the more robust the conversation, the more learning that occurs for everybody. And it's just a big welcome table. I hope I can recreate the atmosphere that I used to have at the dining table with my parents. It'll be a little short because we have my grandmother's delicious cooking, and that won't be available by Zoom.
Juanita B. Johnson, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. And let me just give you, our audience, the name of that book. It's called The Audacity Code, Coloring in Black Outside the Lines by Juanita B. Johnson. And you can get it on Amazon, or I think you may even have a link on your website at JuanitasBJohnson.com. And so, Juanita, I am just super excited that you took the time to be on Beyond the Culture today. You were really inspiring. You've uplifted us. I'm going to say one thing to you, then I'm going to ask you to, unless you have anything else you want to say, I'm going to ask you to leave us with an inspirational message. But so let's do that. Can you leave us with an inspirational message?
The message that I'd like to leave is that Black people have and always will be marvelous creatures of God. We have the dignity, self-worth, self-esteem, and value that other people try to take away from us. It is naturally there. that as a people, I'd like to see us actively, however that you define actively, concern ourselves with the development of our children. I am convinced that if my parents had not been concerned with my emotional and psychological development, that I would not be here talking today, that I would have been raised by the society, which would have been a negative experience, but not having, either you raise your children or you let other people raise your children. So my inspirational message, an inspirational thought, a plea is, please, whatever we do, let us think about the future, our children. Let us take the wisdom from the past and tell the stories of the past so that our children can have something to hold on when we're not there anymore. And I also would like to say thank you so much for inviting me today. This was a lot of fun, and I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm just excited to have you on the show because I think that you are an inspiration to our community. You are someone that is enlightening our intellect by putting our history out front for us to know that we are a great people. So as I would say to all of my guests, Juanita, you have gone beyond the culture, and I want to thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
All right, you take care. Now, if you want to continue to hear inspiring interviews like the one you heard today, I want you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Also, rate the show and please leave a comment. I would also love it if you would share this podcast with your friends to let them know that we're on. Finally, please go to our website at www.beyondtheculturepodcast.com, or you can email me at beyondtheculturepodcast@gmail.com. On the website, you can subscribe to the show and connect with me by leaving your email address. I'd love to hear from you. This is your host, Dr. David Walker, and we'll talk again on Beyond the Culture. Take care.